What if events went differently in Spider-Man Homecoming? What if the TVA arrested Peter Parker? Now, what would have happened in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What would have changed? Find out in today's highly anticipated Marvel's What If fanfiction. Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to another brand new episode. And we're kicking it off with what if the TVA arrested Peter Parker in the MCU. Now, this storyline is going to go over what might have happened if Tom Holland's Peter Parker had a different course of history. What if history was altered in such a way that Peter would be arrested by the TVA? Now, I do want to say thank you so much for watching this year in 2023. I do want to say that 2024 is going to be one of the greatest years that the channel will ever have, because there's going to be so much new content coming out. And I do want to say, make sure you check out for all the latest updates on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, everywhere you go in between, as I will be posting a ton more on all my social media so that you guys can stay all up to date with the latest content. But that being said, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, let's dive in to the brand new Marvel's What If episode. Peter was staring at Vulture as he talked. Vulture explained his plan to Peter in his abandoned warehouse. Peter had tracked Vulture through the help of his best friend, Ned. Vulture, who was also Adrian, was the father of Peter's crush and prom date, Liz. After he had opted to give them a ride to school, Peter had a long recognition that Adrian was the Vulture. Adrian, noticing Peter's uncomfortable nature, began to suspect. Peter left his phone in Adrian's car in order to track his location. Adrian engaged Peter in a conversation to distract Peter from his surroundings. From the fact that he was gearing up his device when his mechanical wings had rebooted, Adrian wired up his device and destroyed the pillars holding the warehouse. The concrete slabs fell on Peter, crushing him underneath. Adrian thought Peter was dead and flew out of the warehouse to accomplish his plans. Crushed physically and emotionally, Peter lacked the strength to remove the debris from him. After breaking down, Peter huffed and puffed, self-encouraging himself. He harnessed his strength and pushed the debris off of him. As he strained his muscles, his patience ran thin, anger clouding his judgment and mind. Adrian had left him to die. He could have easily used his daughter as bait to get to him, but he had come for him instead. Peter pushed more. The slab was heavier than he was, and this duplicated his rage. He strained again, and finally they were off of him. But there were heavier things on his chest. His emotions, his anger. Peter breathed in, but his head wasn't clear enough. He saw red, and he wanted to put an end to this long battle, to prove to himself that he could do it, and to prove to Tony that he wasn't a kid. Adrian had revealed his plans to Peter, hoping that he would die after that. But it was his bane, talking too much. Peter knew Adrian's next target was Tony's plane, which was transporting lots of alien technology, as well as Stark tech. It happened very quickly. Peter had been able to track down the plane, and Vulture was looting the products, just like he had said. Peter was awash with anger. He moved to stop Adrian from taking the goods, and the fight ensued. In the heat of the fight, Peter was slammed against the controls of the plane, which sent it spiraling out of control. Noting this, Adrian jumped off the plane, and Peter followed suit. The fight wasn't over, and he wanted Adrian to know. They both crashed to the sand on the beach, and the plane rocked overhead till it crashed. But Peter's temper was at an all-time high. Recovering from the impact quickly, Peter staggered and launched towards Vulture, who was interested in getting the products and escaping. Vulture hit the ground after Peter had jumped on his back, pushing him. He rotated himself, hitting Peter with his mechanical wing. In the process, Peter's head cocked to the side, and he swung his fist back at Adrian's face, breaking his mask in the process. He didn't stop. The impact of the plane crash had sent mushrooms on fire in the air, alerting some thirsty medical teams of the city, who immediately sent a helicopter to recover the occurrence live. The chopper blade whirled overhead and cast the spotlight on Peter, positioned over Adrian's bleeding face, repeatedly hitting him. The scene was televised live. Location: Peter's high school. Time: prom night. After Peter had left Liz in order to fight her father, unknown to her, it had put her in a bad mood. Liz had left the dance and sat outside, tears slowly falling from her eyes. She was in this state when her phone pinged, a sound she was familiar with. There was a news update. She whipped to the stray tear from her cheeks and opened up her phone. The brightness from the fire illuminated her face. She squinted and saw the focus on the beach. Spider-Man was poised on the top of another, repeatedly hitting him. The person didn't seem to fight back. Personally, Liz was a fan of Spider-Man, so she reckoned whoever he was hitting deserved it. She was about to put her phone away when the news zoomed in on the person's bloodied face. She recognized the scar under that chin anywhere. It was her father. Liz's eyes widened like saucers. She stood from her position on the curb. She stared intensely at her phone and uttered no, as if she were pleading with Spider-Man to leave him. She knew where this beach was. She hoped she would make it there in time to stop Spider-Man. Location: beach. Adrian had stilled, so had Peter's anger. He was still breathing heavily, and the only thing he could hear were the whirling blades of the chopper overhead and the dance of the waves from the ocean. Peter knew how this would look. He would look like a murderer. Tears fell from Peter's face, and he was unsure why he was crying. Then he felt arms lift him up, and he assumed it was the police. He didn't react. He had just killed a man, so he thought. Unknown to Peter, this was not the police. The Time Variancy Authority had come to capture Peter. What had he done was not supposed to happen. Adrian was not meant to be killed by him. Peter looked up and saw the orange portal, and he knew there was something ominous about it. He struggled to put up a fight, but they tased him. Peter passed out from the jolts of electricity. As they passed through the portal, one of the agents placed a centrifugal device on the floor to reset the timeline and left. The device beeped. Adrian turned his head slowly. He was in immense pain. He shifted on the sand, ignoring the hurt he felt. He grabbed the device, sucked in enough air for strength, and threw the device as far away from him as possible. The device rolled into the fire, emitting from the crash. Adrian panicked when he heard a satisfactory loud pop. He didn't know what it was, but he thought that it was a grenade. His life flashed before his eyes. When he entered the fire, it breathed again, and wondered why he had struggled to save himself. He felt life leaving him. The device never went off. The news team in the portal stared in shock. They focused the beam on Adrian. Location: in a taxi. Liz had seen everything. She had seen how they had left her father to die. She had slowly developed this deep anger for Spider-Man. The admiration for him had easily turned to hate. Then the men clad in black with orange insignias, she had seen them too. They had left her father for dead. Liz made her resolve, and the taxi drove her to the location of her father. She was going to avenge him. She was going to kill Spider-Man, and whoever those men were, she would find them too and make them bleed. Location: TVA. Peter was dragged through the halls unconsciously. They had placed a collar on his neck, to make it impossible for him to escape, which also neutralized his powers. He was sprayed with water to wake him up. Peter looked around at the strange environment. He was shoved into a compartment, which looked like an elevator, but was with loose floorboards. Peter stood at his full height, and he stared at the machine in front of him, trying to pick on his clothes. Peter tried to dodge the claws of the machine, but he realized he wasn't as quick as he would have been. The machine, noting his resistance, dissolved Peter's clothing. Peter stared at his form. He was stark naked. The floorboard collapsed and Peter fell through. As he landed, he realized he was dressed in a jumpsuit. Staring at the material, Peter had an idea of where he was. He was in prison. He began to hyperventilate. The man before him stacked heaps of paper and asked Peter to sign, confirming they were his utterances. Peter began to ramble, asking where he was and what the place was. The man casually ripped more papers from the router and placed them on the heap and asked him to sign. Peter moved forward and signed. After Peter had gone through the humiliating process of proving he was not a robot, he was taken to the judgment room. Peter tried to run. The aurora of authority around the room sent a feeling of futility towards Peter. He begged them to take him back. Peter was placed in the dock before Ravana Renslayer, who was the mouthpiece of the timekeepers, who followed the attacks of their directions, of their dictators. Peter broke down in tears when he was asked how he pleaded, whether he was guilty or not guilty. Location, New York. Time worked differently in the TVA than it did in the multiverse. Liz had arrived at the scene of her father's demise, minutes after the TVA left with Peter. She had broken down in tears, cradling his head. Her mother, who had also seen the news, joined her minutes later. The paramedics who were on the scene had confirmed Adrian dead. They had, however, given the family some time with the body before they took him in. He was a criminal. The whole world knew that now, but the bluntness of the reality of Spider-Man killing him shocked the world. With grief in her heart, Liz's vow for revenge was strengthened. She was going to make Spider-Man pay, no matter how long it took. She didn't know where he had been or who he was, but all she knew was that she was going to find him. The first thing on her mind was finding out how her father had ended up the way he had. There had to be a reason. On Spider-Man's capture, the media houses were agone with theories, but none was as close to the truth. One had even supported the theory of him being captured by aliens. The Daily Bugle was in the forefront of the bash against Spider-Man. The reporter, J. Jonah Jameson, didn't support some of the news houses who were pleading with the government to save Spider-Man. He was of the opinion that he was getting punished for his crime, which was deserved. He had taken the role of the police and had committed a crime of murder. No one deserved to take a life, except if it was authorized by the law. But Spider-Man was just a kid in a mask, and if no one punished him, other kids could go around in masks, killing their enemies. Liz had fed her eyes raw with information, but none seemed to give her what she wanted. She had started her quest, tracking down the old team of her father, to find out what he had been involved in. She knew that they would feel that they were owed for her father's death. So when Liz showed up at their door, they welcomed her with open arms and told her everything she asked for. They divulged to her the information of how he had been displaced from work due to the Battle of New York in 2012. Liz had remembered that time. It was a difficult time for their family. They told her how he had been hired later on to clean up the mess. He had discovered alien technology and harnessed its power. They told her about how a secret service had removed him from work without paying him for the work which he had done. Liz's gears were turned. She finally understood. Her father was taking back what was his in the first place, and he was killed in the process. Her hate for Spider-Man tripled. Location, Peter's holding room, TVA. Peter was feeling the weight of his actions. The guilt of murder of Adrian. He had murdered the father of the girl he liked. His mind wandered to Aunt May. If she was going to watch the news, she wouldn't have recognized him, but he wondered what she thought of the heroic character beating up a defenseless man. His mind wandered to Tony Stark, if he would give him the suit again. If he would be very disappointed and feel he had been right to take the suit away because he was a child. Peter didn't know. When his eyes watered and the streaks crawled down his cheeks, he wiped it away. He thought of the agent who had saved him. After they had pronounced his sentence to be reset, Peter didn't know what it meant, but he knew it didn't sound good. The agent had gotten up to plead his case for him. He had defended him like he knew him for a long time. Peter stared at the man in shock while he explained reasons for Peter's pardon. He had towed the line of being an asset to the TVA. Peter didn't know if they would want a murderer on their team, but that wasn't the important part. The important part was that he had been freed. They had him left under the care of Mobius, who had brought him into a room to wait. It was during this waiting period Peter had his introspection. Location, TVA. The agents called Renslayer when they saw the orange line branching off from the thin, horizontal line on the screen. Something was happening in Peter's universe, which wasn't supposed to happen. They needed to correct the timeline. Renslayer realized that Peter's timeline had failed to reset, and the result effects of Adrian's death was occurring. Liz had become a villain, and she was causing a lot of the events that were unexpected. They needed to capture her now from causing more havoc. Mobius needed to find out why Peter had done what he had done. That was the first way he would be able to get Peter to join the TVA. Mobius walked towards Peter's room, while the rest of the agents went to capture Liz. Location, New York City. Liz had gone rogue. After they had told her about her father's plans, she planned to do more. They were going to use the remaining alien technology that they had to take back everything that belonged to her dad. They had been able to build up a replica of her dad's wings for her with upgrades. Her first mission was to reclaim the cargo, which her dad had initially tried to take from Stark's plane before it crashed. It had been captured by the Secret Service. Tracking the product wasn't difficult because energy sources like those gave off immense radiation, which they were able to track easily. Liz was happy that the team didn't see her as a kid. She had stepped into the role of her father perfectly. Her mother, on the other hand, disagreed. She sensed Liz was up to something and had confronted her about it. Liz had been honest. She told her mom everything that she was told, hoping that she would see reasons, but she didn't. Instead, she told Liz to shut down the program, which led to the death of her husband. That wasn't the response Liz was looking for, but it didn't deter her. Her mom didn't see it now, but she would eventually. It had been a smooth operation. Liz stole the consignments and brought it back to the team. They had used days to set up their network. After Adrian's death, some of the people whom he traded with had abandoned them in fear of being next. It was easy to recover their trust. Liz had turned to a life of crime, becoming the Vulturus. Within the days they used to build these upgrades, she had searched for answers about the location of Spider-Man, but he wasn't on any database. She knew that they wouldn't enter him into the database as Spider-Man, but all the sites that had helped her hack didn't match the description of Spider-Man. The deep resentment for everything he stood for was there. Liz thought since he loved the neighborhood so much, she would rather destroy what he loved. This promoted her into robberies, stores, banks, anything to cause chaos. The group didn't care, as long as they got their fair share from the loot, and they remained anonymous. She had slowly climbed into the security authorities' radar. She loved the attention, but she was getting just started. Location, TVA. Mobius entered the room and Peter looked up with a straight face. Devoid of emotions, Mobius sat across from Peter on the chair. Mobius didn't have time to waste, but he needed to be careful. He asked Peter if he knew why he had been taken by the TVA. Peter shook his head but didn't say anything further. Mobius was quiet, racking his brain for another systematic question. Before he spoke, Peter asked him about the place. Mobius had found his opening. He told Peter that it was a place where the timelines were monitored to ensure it followed its designated stream. Mobius went ahead. He told Peter that he had been taken from his timeline because he had done something contrary to his character, thereby destroying his timeline in the process. Peter kept quiet and thought for a while before asking his question. He asked how he had destroyed the timeline, that he had done something that had already been premeditated. Peter also asked why they couldn't just go back and stop him if they controlled time. Mobius laughed. It was a common misconception people had. He told him that changing the past did not change the future. Time didn't work that way. He also told Peter that there were events known as canon events, events that occur to the same personality across the universe. He told Peter that the death of his uncle was one of them. Peter felt a familiar sadness envelope him. This was how he felt after his uncle's death. Peter told him that Vulture wasn't meant to die by his hands. That was also a canon event. Peter marveled at the fact that the theory of the multiverse was real, and he had other universes where he had variants of himself. Mobius asked the question he had initially wanted to ask. He asked why he killed Vulture. Peter didn't have an answer to the question, just stated at the center of the table that appeared to be cut from the rest. Suddenly the door to the room opened, and an agent whispered into Mobius's ear. Mobius stood and told Peter that he would be back and hurried out of the room. Location: New York. Liz was surrounded by cops, but she felt more energetic than usual. She put her hands up in the air, according to their command. She turned her head, scanning through the officers. The helmets scanned them, checking their pulses. Vulturus wanted to see who would shoot first. She found one sweating profusely. She smiled in her mask. She dropped her hands and turned her wings quickly. As predicted, he shot her first. Liz launched and swept through the officers quickly. After she was done, she tried to move but realized everything was slower than usual. She saw an orange glow. It was so familiar. These were the same men that captured Spider-Man. She clicked the button her team had inserted in her suit a long time ago. A tracker in case anything happened. She wanted to know them, and she wanted to know where she was going to be taken. She finally would have her revenge. She had to put up a fight to show initial resistance. She was easily subdued by the agents, who immediately placed a collar around her neck before walking through the portal. The last agent placed the resetting device and ensured it started going off before he left. Everything would be fixed in their timeline. Location: TVA. They took her through the processes they had taken Peter through. Liz had a plan. She needed to know where Spider-Man was. If they had indeed registered him, they would do so without the mask. She needed to look for a person. Liz hoped that her tracker was working and her team would find out where she was. She would need their help soon. However, Liz didn't know that the tracker had ceased working when she crossed the portal. They were in a void, a place where time didn't exist. There was no way that they would be able to track her. As Liz was taken around, she eyed everything and everyone. She had no weapons, and she was very sure that they would take her wings. She needed to know the weapons that they used. Liz spotted a black baton by the side of the agents. It glowed at the tip when it pressed. After she had passed through a trap door, her armor disintegrated. She was in front of a large hall that had large barriers. This made the person passing through the walls in curves and twists to get to the end. After she had gotten her ticket at the entrance, she shuffled herself towards the end. She spotted another agent and a fellow prisoner fighting at the end. She saw the agent use the stick. He pressed the tip of the prisoner and began to disintegrate. She smiled. The weapon would be perfect. Liz was taken before Renslayer in the court. She was found not guilty because the events occurred not because of her mistake, but of a mistake of others. She was to be wiped out of her memory and sent back to her timeline, which had been reset. Liz didn't put up a fight. She wanted them to underestimate her skill set. Liz was taken to a holding room by a single agent. Her moment had come, Liz thought. As the agent pushed her into the room, Liz rotated, held her hands and pulled him toward her and punched him in the throat. The agent gasped for breath. Liz dragged him into the room, flipped him over, and knocked him out. She smiled as she began to remove the agent's clothes. Location: Peter's room. After Mobius had left, Peter had been by himself. He pressed the center of the table, which he had been staring at this whole time. It was a small device and it had materialized. While operating the device, Peter realized that the device was projecting his life. Peter was shocked. He pushed the device forward and the file went forward. Peter could hear the door open, but he didn't care. He stared at himself, being blocked by a variant. He had a glider above his hand, raised above his head, as if he was about to stab somebody. The variant was holding his hand, stopping him. Peter heard something drop, and he turned to stare at the shocked eyes of Liz. The hurt and the betrayal in her tone was evident when she asked if he was truly Spider-Man. She approached him menacingly. The baton was behind her. She didn't want Peter to know. Peter's hands were raised, trying to explain. His tone was lowly. He told her that he hadn't meant to kill her father. Liz chuckled. She had become unhinged. The boy she liked was the one that killed her father. It was easy for the love card to flip into reinstatement. She hated the figure Spider-Man, and she now hated Peter. Peter was spitting apologies. He was distracted by his need to make the situation better that he didn't see Liz in time. She activated the baton and pushed it against Peter's chest. Peter screamed as he began to disintegrate. Immediately, dozens of TVA officers swarmed Peter's cell. But it was already too late. Liz did not give any form of resistance when they restrained her. She had won. And that is going to be, what if the TVA had arrested Peter Parker in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What if Peter Parker had killed the Vulture and the TVA interfered? Now, what did you think of this latest Marvel's What If fanfiction? Thank you so much for watching, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, and I do want to say thank you so much for tuning into the channel. I do want to say there's a lot of updates happening. There's a ton more videos coming down. We got the breakdown analysis videos coming out soon, depending on when you're watching this, but there's going to be a lot of brand new content that I will be packaging up into the channel, as this channel is a multiverse channel, and I really want to go over more content, a variety of different things. We're going to be continuing the multiverse series. We're going to be doing all custom series. There's so many different things happening on the channel right now, so do make sure to subscribe, like, share, as you're not going to want to miss a thing. And I do want to say, make sure you check out the Patreon, as any little bit helps, as it goes directly towards videos being animated, it goes towards brand new series, and it goes towards the rest of the team here at Miss the Part Productions. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and do make sure to request part 2. I mean, we're gonna see if we do an analysis video on this particular episode. You know, you might have your comments within that video. So if you have a comment, if you have questions about this video, maybe how the video was made, why I made certain story choices, make sure you comment, because I will be featuring tons of people. So make sure to comment what you thought of the actual video, the storyline, and ask me questions, as I will have that in those videos. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have an amazing day. Peace out.